Gente, eu estou aqui com o John Sharkey, ele é um anatomista clínico, ele também ele fez também exercise physiologist, um fisiologista do exercício, um terapeuta neuromuscular, e ele faz parte da editorial, da board editorial of the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. E hoje a gente vai falar sobre Biotensegridade. A gente vai começar falando hoje sobre Biotensegridade. Okay, John, so I already introduced you, and I think we can start with the question, what is the difference between tensegrity and biotensegrity?
Great question to begin. Fantastic, because many people really do not understand the difference between tensegrity and biotensegrity. So this is a very simple model of tensegrity. And this is a model that was made by my late friend who passed away just recently, Tom Fleming. And Tom was a wonderful artist who produced beautiful tensegrity models. Now, this model is called the squish. In other words, you can squish it and it pops back up. And it's a children's toy. It's made by a company called the Manhattan Toy Company, and it's for babies. Let me explain in very simplistic terms. With this structure, we see that there are two members. One member is a continuous member, so this elastic band would be the continuous member. The second member would be the bars or the struts or the dowels here. These bars are struts, and these are discontinuous. In other words, you can see that they end here and they don't continue on infinitely. Yeah. The two members, one is continuous, one is discontinuous. And the discontinuous member provides compression, so it pushes out, and this creates tension in the continuous member. So this is a small white lie, a small lie, because this, of course, this material, this elasticated material is not continuous. Somebody had to tie, and here it is, somebody had to tie a little knot in the elastic band, because of course it is not continuous. Now, the difference therefore, first of all, let me explain. The relationship between the compressive forces pushing out and the tensional forces that is created, this creates what we refer to as lift. So you can see, for instance, that in the human body, people will describe the tensegrity in such a way that they would say that the dowels or the struts represent the harder tissues, the skeletal tissues, and the elasticated bands are representing the myofasciae, the muscles, ligaments, tendons, aponeurosis, the viscera, all of the soft tissues. And so this relationship ensures that the bones or the dowels, they do not touch. They're always kept apart. So normal regular forces acting upon this model, this is an icosahedron. If you pull on the structure, it stiffens. And if you push on the structure, it stiffens throughout the entire structure. So it's spreading its forces and sharing the forces throughout the entire structure, not just to one place, but to everywhere. And specifically, so that when forces are acting upon it, that the bones should not touch. Now, we could use extreme force, and this would cause pathology or injury or damage to the tensegrity. If I had 10 of these tensegrities, and if I applied an identical force to each 10, enough to damage them, each one would be damaged in a different place. There's no guarantee that they would all be damaged in the same place. It's not possible. Exactly. So now what is the major difference? And there are many, by the way, but we'll just talk about a few today. What are the major differences then between the tensegrity and the biotensegrity? And let's just stick to human beings, you and me. Of course, we could talk about all living things, but we'll stick to humans. So in the tensegrity, there is no life, there is no breath, there is no nervous system. The materials are the wrong materials. We are not made of this type of material. As we said, or as I said earlier, this member, which is the continuous member, it has to be tied off. But in the human body, there is no beginning, there is no ending, there is just one. So in the biotensegrity, there is only one member. It may look like there are two members, but in the tensegrity, there are two members. Then the last point I'd make to you is that this is the icosahedron, and I won't go into the detail of icosahedron, 20 faces and 12 vertices, and it's a bit too technical. But this is the basic fundamental architecture of all living cells. However, the difference between this model and this model that I'm now holding in my hand is that I like to use this model for talking about extra dimensions, because I believe that the human form is not based on 3 dimensions, but it is based on a minimum of 4 dimensions. And from an anatomical viewpoint, because our eyes are set just off the center of our head, the information from this eye and the information from this eye go back to the cortical areas in the brain, visual cortical areas, and the brain says, oh, there's a problem here because these images are not the same and they're blurred. So the brain overlaps the images and it creates what we call 3-dimensional sight. And so we really do not see in 3 dimension. We actually see in something short of 3 dimension. In anatomy, we call it pseudo 3D or 2.5D. In other words, our brain provides us with a facility of depth perception. So if we had the ability to see the true anatomy of this looks like a circle, but the reality of this circle is in fact this, which this is one structure which goes through itself. Can you see that it goes through itself? So it's a toroid. Now, if we take this structure and we try to compress it, it will resist me. It will not move.
Então, na verdade, o nosso cérebro... Can you show this material close so I can explain them and then you open again?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to add something, if that's okay, Anna. Let me add something so you can translate. Okay. So I was saying that if you use vertical, straight linear forces, it will resist me.
Okay.
Yes? Okay. But if I use a rotation, it does not resist me. And now you can see an intervertebral disc.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay.
Isn't it?
Yes. So our brain is not able to see in this dimension, right? We only see...
Exactly. And so when we are doing dissection, when we are dissecting the human body, we need to be very, very careful about how we interpret what it is that we see. In the 21st century, we now have computer technology. We now have MRI and CAT scans and PET scans, and we can now create multidimensional images of the true reality of the form of living tissue. And I'm just going to finish by saying this would be a tension compression model, you see here. So in other words, if I do this, it springs back. But this would not be a tensegrity. And in fact, without the elastic band, this would be like a column. And you can see that these two pieces will touch. So they will rub off each other. And this would be, if you put your hands together, if your viewers put their hands together and do this, they'll feel friction, and the friction creates heat. And this would be a terrible construction model for human beings. So our bones should never be rubbing off each other, and our tissues should never be rubbing off each other. They should move relative to each other.
So how now my question is, thinking about the biotensegrity model, what would this implicate in our clinical environment?
There are so many implications, but for today's conversation, I'm going to again simplify. So what the biotensegrity or tensegrity model tells you is that when I take a strut and I move it, the entire structure moves. Yes? So what that means is that when a person receives an insult, an insult, whether it's an external blow or it could be a psychological, you're useless, you'll never be a good person. This is also an insult to the body. You have no way of being absolutely sure that those forces are causing this person to have an ankle problem. It could be a shoulder problem. It could be a tension. It could be a toothache. It can manifest itself in any particular way. It's a lot for you to say, Anna, I know. Okay. And so one must take a journey into biotensegrity anatomy for the 21st century in order to build the knowledge and skills so that you can, in fact, interpret where a person's true issue is. Because a person may have a pain and the problem in their shoulder, but that may simply be the squeaky wheel. That may simply be the messenger. And we have to develop the skills and knowledge to be able to locate the true source of the person's problem. Otherwise, you'll treat the shoulder time and time again. You will operate, you will inject the shoulder, you will rub topical creams, and you will not get a resolution of your problem.
That's very important when we are treating a patient and when we see our clients, so we can have a true overview and understand where the source of the pain is coming from.
Exactly. What is the true insult? Because it can be from the head down, it can be from the feet up, or it can be from the pelvis out. And so there's hierarchy in terms of how the body deals with these forces and insults.
Okay, and then there's a ongoing question here that you have said that bone is also fascia. Can you please explain a little bit more about this?
It's so simple. It's again, everything I teach is simplicity. So let's just go to embryology. And in embryology, we have multiplication of cells, and then the cells begin to create a soup, a matrix, for which all the cellular content, will be living within. If you wish, it's a scaffolding, a framework, for the cellular content. And so basically, what we have is a spectrum that goes from one end, stiffness or hardness, to the other end, you can say softness. In other words, hardness and softness may be something like the meninges, or, I'm sorry about this, but even snot. So within the fascia here, this fascia, the body lays down specialized red-colored proteins, which are experts at contracting. But in this fascia, the body simply lays down deoxyapatite, calcium crystals, so that it becomes harder, but it's still pliable. So I said that there is hierarchy in the human body. There is hierarchy from a neurological viewpoint. And if people do not understand that bone is fascia, then they will miss the opportunity to recognize and treat bone as the true insult. There are many people who have pain problems in body parts, but the MRI and the X-ray and the CAT scans and the blood tests say everything is perfect. And the reason for that is that the bone can shape change. It can rotate, and it can, if you wish, it can shorten, or it can contract or compress, and it can lengthen. But it can just change to the point where it does not fracture, but it's close to fracture. In other words, it's enough to cause, terrible pain. And oftentimes there is a requirement for a therapist to be able to offer therapeutic intervention. Otherwise, this bone will not derotate.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, John, it's 9 o'clock. I know you have to catch a plane. It's 11 o'clock at your place.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Listen, Anna, thank you so much again, as I say, for your interest in biotensegridade anatomy for the 21st century. And I wish everybody well. We're coming up to the Christmas holiday, so happy Christmas to everybody and a very successful new year.